Captain Piero Calamai sees the lights through the fog. Just a glow at first, then definition, white masthead lights emerging from the darkness ahead. He's commanded the Andrea Doria through 50 Atlantic crossings without incident. He knows these waters. He trusts his radar, but then he sees something that freezes his heart. A red light, a port light. That ship isn't passing safely to starboard. It's pointing directly at him. He shouts, "Tutto sinistra," full left rudder. But the Stockholm's ice-reinforced bow is already screaming toward his starboard side at 40 knots combined closing speed. In 11 hours, Italy's most beautiful ocean liner will rest at the bottom of the Atlantic. In 11 minutes, 46 people will be dead. She was magnificent. 700 feet of Italian elegance slicing through the Atlantic, her twin red and white stacks announcing her presence from miles away. If you stood at her bow and looked aft, you'd see a floating palace, 11 decks rising like a wedding cake, each level trimmed with teak railings and polished brass. Her hull was painted black below the waterline, white above, creating the illusion that she floated on air rather than water. And in the summer sun of 1956, when the light hit her at just the right angle, the SS Andrea Doria gleamed like something out of a dream. The Italians called her Il Galleggiante Galleria d'Arte, the floating art gallery. It wasn't marketing hyperbole. She carried more than $1 million worth of original artwork, about 35 million in today's money. Murals by Salvatore Fiume covered the walls of her first-class lounge, incorporating Leonardo's Mona Lisa, Cellini's Perseus, works by Titian and Raphael. The legendary Zodiac Suite, the most opulent first-class accommodation, featured walls, upholstery, and quilts decorated by Piero Fornasetti with 17th-century star maps. Every surface covered in golden zodiac signs. Lucio Fontana's mosaics surrounded the swimming pools, yes, 3 of them, one for each passenger class, arranged in a tiered array at the stern. No ship had ever offered 3 outdoor pools before. Walk her decks, and you'd encounter bronze sculptures, ceramic panels by Guido Gambone, furniture by Gio Ponti, decorative schemes by more than a dozen of Italy's most prominent artists and architects. Stand in the first-class ballroom and look up at Piero Zuffi's The Feast of Neptune. Enter the winter garden and lose yourself among Gambone's massive ceramic panels. In the first-class lounge stood a life-sized bronze statue of Admiral Andrea Doria himself, cast by Giovanni Paganin, watching over the passengers with an expression of eternal vigilance. She was Italy's post-war promise made steel. Built at Ansaldo shipyards in Genoa, she represented everything the nation wanted to reclaim after the devastation of World War II: speed, beauty, innovation, prestige. She was designed to make Americans forget the years of war and death, to make them dream again of glamorous Atlantic crossings. Today, she rests in pieces at the bottom of the Atlantic, 240 feet down in the cold darkness off Nantucket. 22 divers have died trying to explore her remains. The wreck is so dangerous, so treacherous, with fishing nets and collapsing structure and numbing cold, that it's been called the Mount Everest of scuba diving. What artifacts remain? Recovered fragments of that $1 million art collection, pieces of railing, the ship's bell, sit in museums and private collections. The bronze statue of Admiral Doria, cut free from the first-class lounge by divers in 1964, stands now in a museum in Italy, its ankles forever truncated where the hacksaws severed it from the deck. But on that July evening in 1956, as she steamed toward New York carrying 1,706 people through a thickening fog bank, the Andrea Doria was still whole, still beautiful, still the pride of Italy. She had less than 3 hours to live. The decision to build the Andrea Doria was made in the rubble. December 1949. Italy had lost the war, lost her prestige, lost her greatest ocean liners, the SS Rex and SS Conte di Savoia, both casualties of the conflict. If you wanted to understand Italy's humiliation, you only had to look at the North Atlantic. The French had their Ile de France, the British had the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, the Americans had the United States, and Italy had nothing. So the Italian line, Società di Navigazione Italia, headquartered in Genoa, made a declaration. They would build not one ship but 2, the SS Andrea Doria and her sister, the SS Cristoforo Colombo. These vessels would be symbols, proof that Italy had survived, had rebuilt, had reclaimed her place among the great maritime nations. They would sail the sunny southern route from Genoa through the Mediterranean to New York, connecting the old world to the new with style and speed that would make the world remember why Italian design was legendary. The contract went to Ansaldo shipyards at Sestri Ponente, near Genoa, the same shipyard that had built Italy's wartime fleet. The workers there had built destroyers and cruisers. Now they would build beauty. The keel was laid on February 9th, 1950, quietly, without ceremony, because trade unions were in unrest. unrest, and the political climate was tense. But the work proceeded. 29,000 tons of steel, shaped and welded and riveted into a hull that would be 212 meters long. That's longer than 2.5 football fields, laid end to end. Her beam, her width, was 90 feet, not particularly wide for a ship of her length. This would matter later, in ways no one could predict. The designers faced competing demands. She had to be fast, 23 knots of service speed, with a maximum of 26. That required powerful engines. She had to be luxurious. Passenger spaces had to rival the finest hotels. That required a heavy, ornate superstructure. She had to be stable in Atlantic swells. That required proper distribution of weight, careful ballasting, attention to her center of gravity. They made compromises. The fuel tanks were positioned along both the port and starboard sides of the hull, wide, shallow tanks that ran the length of the ship. The builders specified that as fuel was consumed during a crossing, empty tanks must be ballasted with seawater to maintain stability. This was crucial. A ship with empty tanks on one side and full tanks on the other would list dangerously if struck, but filling tanks with seawater meant more time and money at each port, and a heavier ship burned more fuel. So the Italian line made a decision. They wouldn't follow the specification. They'd leave the empty tanks empty. It was a small economy, a practical decision. It would kill 46 people. Model testing during the design phase had shown something troubling. If the ship was struck with significant force on one side, she would develop a dangerous list. The narrow beam relative to her length, that beam-to-length ratio that made her sleek and fast, also made her tender, prone to rolling. The heavy superstructure, full of that magnificent artwork, made her top-heavy. The watertight bulkheads, those steel walls designed to contain flooding, extended only up to A deck. Any list exceeding 20 degrees would allow water to cascade over the tops of those bulkheads into adjacent compartments, and lifeboats could only be lowered at a maximum 15 to 20 degree list. The builders knew this. When they later built the replacement liner Leonardo da Vinci, they set 3,000 tons of iron ballast into her bilges to correct the deficiency. But in 1950, speed and beauty took priority over a theoretical weakness that might never be tested. On June 16, 1951, Donna Giuseppina Saragat christened the ship. The hull slid into the water amid cheers and celebrations. Over the next 18 months, workers installed 6 Parsons geared steam turbines driving twin screws, 50,000 shaft horsepower at service speed, 62,500 at maximum. 4 large boilers supplied the steam. 5 diesel generators provided electrical power, modern air conditioning, 2 radar systems, cutting edge for the era, a gyro compass, 16 steel lifeboats, plus 2 motor launches, and the art, always the art. Giulio Minoletti, the principal designer, oversaw the work of those dozens of Italian artists, transforming the ship's public spaces into galleries. The budget for artwork alone exceeded $1 million, the cost of a substantial office building. Sea trials in November and December 1952 showed she could do 26.44 knots on the measured mile, fast enough to compete with anyone on the Atlantic. On January 14, 1953, she departed Genoa on her maiden voyage. 9 days later, she arrived in New York, having covered 3,278 miles at an average speed of 23 knots. The American press was dazzled. They called her the most beautiful ship in the world. Passengers who boarded for the return journey found themselves walking through spaces that felt more like Renaissance palaces than ship interiors. First-class passengers paid $4,350 for the crossing, roughly $150,000 in today's money. They got their money's worth. But on that maiden voyage, something happened that should have been a warning. A rogue wave struck the ship, rolling her to a 28-degree list. 28 degrees, past the critical threshold where water could overflow those watertight bulkheads. Passengers and crew were thrown from their feet. Furniture slid across decks. For a moment, everyone aboard the Andrea Doria understood that this ship, for all her beauty, had a vulnerability. Then she righted herself. The moment passed, and over the next 3 years, as she completed approximately 100 Atlantic crossings, that maiden voyage list was gradually forgotten. Just a freak occurrence, nothing to worry about. The ship carried celebrities, Cary Grant, Spencer Tracy, Kim Novak, Joan Crawford. She carried emigrants seeking new lives in America. She carried businessmen and tourists and honeymooners. She was fast, she was reliable, she was magnificent. By the summer of 1956, Captain Piero Calamai had commanded her for all those crossings, and he knew every quirk, every sound, every vibration of her engines. He thought he knew everything about his ship, but he didn't know about those empty fuel tanks, didn't know that the Italian line had been quietly violating the builder's specifications on every crossing, didn't know that his beautiful ship was, in a very real sense, a time bomb waiting for the right conditions to detonate. The construction had cost approximately $29 million, about $320 million today. That investment would sink to the bottom of the Atlantic just 3.5 years into the ship's service life, along with 46 human lives. Let's meet the people whose fate we're about to trace through these final hours. Because what's coming isn't just a story about a ship, it's a story about parents and children, newlyweds and professionals, crew members who thought they were heading into just another routine night on the North Atlantic. Captain Piero Calamai was 58 years old, born on Christmas Day, 1897, into a Genoese family that lived and breathed the sea. His father founded Italy's first naval magazine. His brother rose to Rear Admiral and commanded the Naval Academy at Livorno. Piero himself had entered naval service on July 17, 1916, at age 18, and earned a silver medal of military valor for bravery in World War I. During World War II, he earned a second silver medal for beaching the badly damaged battleship Caio Duilio after the British torpedo attack at Taranto. 27 different ships, over 20 years of ocean-going command without mishap. He was a careful man, methodical. He'd commanded the Andrea Doria since her maiden voyage, approximately 50 round-trip crossings, and he knew her as well as anyone could. This July 1956 voyage, he suspected, would be his last aboard. He was due for vacation, and then he expected command of the Cristoforo Colombo, whose captain was reaching mandatory retirement age. Just one more crossing, then a new command, a new chapter. He would never command another ship. Third Officer Johan Ernst Bogislaus Carstens Johansson was 26 years old and standing watch alone for reportedly the first time in his career. This would be important. He was aboard the other ship, the MS Stockholm, a Swedish liner half the size of the Andrea Doria, young, eager, competent enough to be trusted with a bridge watch, but inexperienced. And on this night, he would make a decision that seemed perfectly reasonable based on what his radar told him. The only problem was that his radar was telling him something false. Linda Morgan was 14 years old. She was traveling with her mother Jane, her stepfather Camille Chianfara, a New York Times correspondent, and her 8-year-old half-sister Joan. The family occupied cabins 52 and 54 on the upper deck, starboard side. Linda shared cabin 52 with little Joan. They were excited to be returning to America after their father's posting in Madrid. Linda had no way of knowing that, in a few hours, she would wake up on a completely different ship, having been somehow transported through a collision without understanding how. They would call her the Miracle Girl, but the miracle would come at an unfathomable cost. Ferdinand Pete Theriot and his wife Frances were heirs to the San Francisco Chronicle publishing fortune, both 35 years old, sophisticated, wealthy, traveling first class. They occupied cabin 180 on the foyer deck. Their 13-year-old son Peter was in a separate cabin down the hall, one of those small decisions parents make, giving a teenager a bit of independence. The couple had no idea that their cabin's location, combined with the angle of the approaching ship, had already sealed their fate. Ruth Roman was a 34-year-old Warner Brothers star, recognized from her role in Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train. She was traveling with her 3.5-year-old son Dickie. That evening, she was in the Belvedere Observation Lounge, in an elegant evening gown, enjoying the social atmosphere of the first-class spaces. Her son was already asleep in their cabin. She had no reason to think this night would end with her son in one lifeboat, herself in another, separated in the darkness, not knowing if she would ever see him again. Richardson Dilworth, mayor of Philadelphia, was returning from a Middle East trip with his wife Anne, accomplished, connected, a man accustomed to leadership. Anne had recently read Walter Lord's A Night to Remember, the definitive account of the Titanic disaster. The book was on her mind. She knew how these stories ended. When the collision came, she would be the one who said, "I think we have hit an iceberg." Maria Sergio was traveling with her 4 children, Giuseppe, 13, Anna Maria, 10, Domenica, 7, and little Rocco, just 4 years old, tourist-class passengers, down in the less expensive sections of the ship. They were emigrating to South Bend, Indiana, to reunite with Maria's husband, Ross. Little Rocco had begged his Uncle Paul to let him sleep in his uncle's cabin further down the hall. Uncle Paul had said no, stay with your mother. That decision would matter. Dr. Theo Peterson, a chiropractor from New Jersey, occupied cabin 56 with his wife, Martha. They were looking forward to getting home. They'd gone to bed early, tired from the voyage. Dr. Peterson had no way of knowing that in a few hours, he would glimpse the white prow of another ship entering his cabin before being hurled through the wall, or that his wife would be pinned with a broken spine and 2 broken legs, and that he would divide his single morphine dose between Martha and an injured stranger, and that Martha would die in his arms before anyone could free her. These are just some of the 1,134 passengers who boarded at Genoa, Cannes, Naples, and Gibraltar. Add 572 crew members, waiters, engineers, stewards, deckhands, cooks, and you have 1,706 human lives, not a number, 1,706 individuals, each with names and histories and people who loved them and plans for the future. 46 of them would never see another sunrise. To understand what happens next, you need to understand the world these people inhabited. It's 1956. Dwight Eisenhower is president. Elvis Presley is scandalizing parents with hip gyrations on television. The Cold War is intensifying. Just 3 months earlier, Nikita Khrushchev denounced Stalin's crimes in a secret speech that sent shockwaves through the communist world. In October, Soviet tanks will roll into Budapest. In November, Britain and France will invade Egypt over the Suez Canal, triggering an international crisis. But for Americans in the summer of 1956, life feels prosperous and safe. The economy is booming. Suburbs are expanding. Families are buying television sets and moving to houses with yards and garages. The war has been over for 11 years. The future looks bright. Ocean liner travel is still the primary way to cross the Atlantic, though that's about to change. In just 2 years, Boeing 707s will begin non-stop jet service between the United States and Europe, and the age of the great ships will effectively end. But in 1956, if you want to travel from Italy to New York, you board a ship. If you're wealthy, you book first class and enjoy multiple courses at dinner, dancing in elegant ballrooms and lounging by the pool. If you're an emigrant leaving Italy for a new life in America, you book tourist class and share cramped quarters deep in the hull, but you're still traveling on the same magnificent vessel that's carrying millionaires and movie stars. The class distinctions are stark. First-class passengers pay 10 times what tourist-class passengers pay. They eat different food in different dining rooms. They access different decks. They have different-sized cabins with different amenities. If something goes wrong, if, say, the ship develops a dangerous list, those differences might determine who reaches a lifeboat and who doesn't. But nothing is going to go wrong. That's the assumption everyone operates under. This is 1956. Ships are safe now. We've learned from the Titanic, from the Lusitania, from all those disasters of the past. Modern ships have radar. They have radio. They have international agreements about shipping lanes and safety procedures. They have watertight compartments and rigid regulations, except that some of those regulations have loopholes, and some of those safety features only work if people use them correctly. And some ships are carrying hidden vulnerabilities that won't be discovered until it's too late. The Andrea Doria is considered virtually unsinkable. That's not marketing language, that's what naval architects genuinely believe. The ship is divided into 11 watertight compartments. She's designed to stay afloat with any 2 adjacent compartments flooded. The technology is solid. The design is sound. What could go wrong? We know what's going to go wrong. They don't. That radar technology everyone trusts? It's about to enable the very collision it was designed to prevent. Those watertight compartments? They'll contain the flooding only if the ship stays relatively level, but she won't. Those shipping lane agreements? One of the ships approaching the Andrea Doria isn't following them, and those empty fuel tanks that should have been filled with ballast water. They're about to become the single most catastrophic design violation in peacetime maritime history. But on this beautiful July evening, as the Andrea Doria approaches the final day of her 101st Atlantic crossing, no one suspects any of this. The passengers are packing for arrival in New York. The crew is preparing for port. Captain Calamai is on the bridge, doing what he's done successfully 100 times before. In 3 hours, everything he knows about commanding a ship will be proven tragically insufficient. July 17th, 1956, 11 a.m. Genoa. The Andrea Doria slips away from her dock with 5 long blasts of her whistle, a sound deep enough to vibrate in your chest. She's carrying 1,134 passengers, about 90% capacity. Not completely full, but full enough. 190 in first class, where a ticket for the 9-day crossing costs as much as a new car. 267 in cabin class, the comfortable middle option. 677 in tourist class, mostly Italian emigrants leaving the old country for American dreams, carrying everything they own in a few battered suitcases. The ship makes her scheduled stops. Cannes that same afternoon, 48 passengers board, wealthy tourists who've spent the summer on the Riviera. Naples the next morning, 744 passengers, the largest single group, mostly southern Italians who've sold their homes and farms to buy passage to America. Gibraltar, around July 20th, 65 passengers, the final additions. Then the bow turns west, toward open ocean and New York. Expected arrival, 9 a.m., Thursday, July 26th, 1956. For the passengers, the voyage is everything they hoped. The weather is perfect. Clear skies, calm seas, the kind of crossing that makes you understand why people love ocean travel. In first class, the Dilworths and the Thierios dine at tables set with fine china and crystal. Ruth Roman charms fellow passengers in the observation lounge. Elsewhere on the ship, Linda Morgan and her sister Joan explore the decks, supervised by their mother, while their stepfather Camille works on his correspondence. Down in tourist class, conditions are more modest but still comfortable by the standards of the day. Maria Sergio keeps her 4 children close, speaking to them in Italian, dreaming of the reunion with her husband in Indiana. Other emigrants practice their English, preparing for immigration inspections at New York. The crew moves through familiar routines. 572 men and women who keep this floating city operating. Engineers tend the turbines and boilers. Waiters serve meals. Stewards make beds and clean cabins. On the bridge, officers stand their watches, monitoring the horizon, tracking the ship's position. Captain Calamai is everywhere. He knows most of the passengers by name. He's made this crossing so many times that regular travelers seek him out to shake his hand. He inspects the ship, talks with his officers, makes small decisions about course and speed. Everything is routine. Everything is normal. The Andrea Doria is making 23 knots, her normal cruising speed, fast enough to keep the schedule, but not so fast as to strain the engines. At this pace, she's burning through her fuel oil steadily. The fuel tanks on both the port and starboard sides are emptying, and they're staying empty, not being filled with ballast water as the builders specified. Just empty. No one mentions this to Captain Calamai. It's policy, Italian line policy. Why waste time and money pumping seawater in and out of tanks? The ship feels fine, stable, responsive. Everything is working exactly as it should. July 25th, Wednesday afternoon. The ship is approaching the final leg of the journey. New York is less than 200 miles away. The passengers are beginning to pack. Some are writing final letters to mail upon arrival. Children are excited, running through the corridors despite their parents scolding. The crew is preparing for the complex choreography of docking, arranging baggage, organizing immigration paperwork, planning for the quick turnaround before the next voyage back to Genoa. Around 3 p.m., Captain Calamai observes fog forming on the western horizon. This is normal for this area, the waters south of Nantucket, where warm Gulf Stream currents meet the cold Labrador Current. Summer fog, common, expected, but it requires precautions. Calamai orders the fog whistle activated, 6-second blasts every 100 seconds. He closes all watertight doors. He posts a bow lookout with a telephone line to the bridge. He stations extra men in the engine rooms. He activates both radar units and has officers begin monitoring the screens. He reduces speed from 23 knots to 21.8 knots. This will be criticized later. Barely any reduction at all, less than 2 knots in fog that will soon reduce visibility to less than 50 yards. But this is standard practice for the era. Radar has made captains confident. They can see other ships miles away, long before any danger. Why slow down significantly when you have electronic eyes watching for you? By 9 p.m., the Andrea Doria is steaming through dense fog. Visibility is measured in yards, not miles, but the radar shows nothing concerning. The Nantucket lightship passes on the starboard side, exactly where it's supposed to be. Calamai orders a course change to 268 degrees, heading directly for the Ambrose Channel approach to New York. Passengers are finishing dinner or gathering in the lounges for evening entertainment. Linda Morgan and Joan Cianfara are asleep in cabin 52. The Thierryos are in cabin 180, preparing for bed. Ruth Roman is still socializing in her evening gown. Down in tourist class, Maria Sergio has tucked her 4 children into their bunks. On the bridge, Senior Second Officer Curzio Francini and Third Officer Eugenio Giannini are monitoring the radar screens. The ship slides through the fog like a ghost, her fog whistle booming every 100 seconds, her radar sweeping the darkness for any sign of another vessel. At approximately 10:45 p.m., Francini spots something on the radar, a target bearing 4 degrees to starboard. Distance, 17 nautical miles. 17 miles is plenty of room, plenty of time to assess and adjust if necessary. No cause for alarm, just another ship passing in the night. Francini watches the target move across the radar screen. The bearing is increasing to the right, suggesting the other vessel will pass on the starboard side. Good, a starboard to starboard passing. Standard, safe. He doesn't plot the other ship's course systematically, doesn't use the charting equipment in the adjacent room to calculate exactly where that target is heading. He just watches it casually on the radar display, making visual estimates. This is normal procedure for 1956. No one has trained officers to do rigorous radar plotting. The technology is too new. The procedures haven't been fully developed. Radar is seen as a convenient early warning system, not as a precision navigation tool requiring careful analysis. So Francini watches. The target gets closer. 10 miles, 8 miles, still tracking right, still indicating a starboard to starboard passing. No problem. What Franchini doesn't know, what he has no way of knowing, is that 17 miles away, on the bridge of another ship, a 26-year-old officer is watching his own radar screen and coming to a completely different conclusion about what's happening. 10:53 p.m. On the bridge of the MS Stockholm, Third Officer Carstens Johansson is plotting points on his radar screen. He's alone except for helmsman Peder Larsen and a crow's nest lookout. Captain Nordenson went to his cabin at 10 p.m., leaving instructions to call him if fog was encountered. Carsten sees the target on his radar. He plots 2 points, 10 miles away, bearing 2 degrees to port, then 6 miles away, bearing 4 degrees to port. According to his plot, this looks like a port-to-port passing. The other ship will pass on his left side. The bearing is increasing to port, which means they're diverging. Good, but there's something puzzling him. If there's another ship 6 miles ahead, he should be able to see its lights. The Stockholm hasn't entered the fog bank yet. Visibility is about 5 or 6 miles under a nearly full moon. So where are the lights? It never occurs to him that the other ship is concealed inside a fog bank ahead, that the Andrea Doria is steaming through dense fog, while the Stockholm is still in relatively clear conditions. This asymmetry, one ship seeing clearly, one ship blind, is about to prove catastrophic. What Carstens also doesn't know, what modern analysis strongly suggests, is that he's misread his radar's range scale. He believes the radar is set to the 15 nautical mile scale. It's actually on the 5 nautical mile scale. The Stockholm's radar has unlighted range settings on a darkened bridge, an easy mistake to make. This means Carstens believes the Andrea Doria is roughly 3 times farther away than she actually is. Based on his misperception, Carstens calculates that he has time for a routine course adjustment. To widen the passing distance, he'll turn to starboard, to the right, not a dramatic turn, just 22.5 degrees, perfectly normal. It will take them farther from the other ship's projected path. He orders the turn. The Stockholm begins to angle south, 10:50 to 11 p.m. On the Andrea Doria's bridge, Captain Calamai is watching the radar with his officers. The target has closed to approximately 3.5 miles, bearing 15 degrees to starboard. It's tracking right, which continues to suggest a safe starboard-to-starboard passing. But Calamai wants to widen the margin a bit. He orders a 4-degree course change to port, from 268 degrees to 264 degrees. Just a small adjustment, turning left to give the other ship more room as it passes on the right. The Andrea Doria begins to turn south. Do you see what just happened? Both ships have turned south, toward each other. The Andrea Doria turned left, the Stockholm turned right, and now they're converging on exactly the same point in the ocean. Neither captain knows what the other is doing. Neither captain attempts radio contact. Neither captain has any idea that the geometry they're both perceiving, the safe passing they both believe is developing, is completely wrong. They're actually approaching nearly head-on, and under the international rules of the road, Rule 14, vessels meeting head-on should each alter course to starboard, to the right, for a port-to-port passing. But Calamai has turned to port, to the left, violating the rule, because he believes a starboard-to-starboard pass is already developing. And Carstens has turned 22 degrees to starboard, far more than necessary, because he believes the other ship is much farther away than it actually is. 11:06 p.m. The Stockholm is closing at 18.5 knots. The Andrea Doria at 21.8 knots. Their combined closing speed, 40 knots. That's 74 kilometers per hour. 2 massive ships, steel and machinery, and human cargo, rushing toward each other through the darkness. Distance between them, less than 2 miles now. 11:08 p.m. On the Andrea Doria's starboard bridge wing, someone spots lights through the fog. Just a glow at first, then definition. A ship, white masthead lights, and wait, why can they see a red light? That's a port light. That means the ship is pointing toward them, not past them. Captain Calamai sees it. His heart freezes. The geometry he thought he understood, safe starboard to starboard passing, is wrong, completely wrong. That ship is going to hit them. He shouts, "Tutto sinistra!" Full left rudder, desperate attempt to swing the stern clear, to turn the ship so that the collision, if it comes, hits the bow instead of the vulnerable midships. At exactly the same moment, Third Officer Carstens on the Stockholm sees the massive shape of the Andrea Doria emerge from the fog bank, roughly 20 degrees to port, much closer than he thought possible. He orders full starboard rudder and full speed astern on both engines. Both ships are turning, but physics is cruel. At these speeds, with these masses, ships don't turn quickly. They need time, distance, and there isn't enough of either. 11:10 p.m., the Stockholm's ice-reinforced bow, that wedge of thickened steel designed to ride up on and crush Baltic ice, strikes the Andrea Doria on the starboard side approximately 1/3 of her length from the bow. Directly below the bridge, the angle is nearly 90 degrees, a T-bone collision. The Stockholm's bow penetrates 40 feet into the Andrea Doria's hull, 25% of her 90-foot beam. Steel screams, rivets pop like gunfire. The impact opens 7 of 11 decks. In cabin 52, Linda Morgan is asleep. The bow slides under her bed. In cabin 56, Dr. Thur Peterson glimpses white steel entering his room before being hurled through a wall. In cabin 54, Camille Cianfara is thrown from his bed into cabin 56. His wife Jane hears him groan, then silence. He is dead. In cabin 180, the Theriaults, Pete and Francis, are crushed instantly as their cabin is flattened from hull to hallway. In cabin 46, Colonel Walter Carlin staggers from the bathroom to find his wife's bed gone, replaced by a hole opening to fog and sea. His wife Jeanette is gone. Down in tourist class, Maria Sergio and her 4 children die in the same instant, their cabin obliterated. The Stockholm is lodged inside the Andrea Doria, like a cork in a bottle. For 3 or 4 seconds, maybe 5, the 2 ships are joined, metal embedded in metal. Then the opposing momentum of the 2 vessels pulls them apart. The Stockholm's bow screeches down the Andrea Doria's starboard side, showering sparks into the night. Approximately 30 feet of the Stockholm's bow is torn away. 5 crew members in the forward compartments are killed. And in the hull of the Andrea Doria, something catastrophic is happening. 5 starboard fuel tanks have been ripped open. Seawater is flooding in, 500 tons of it, rushing into spaces that should have been filled with ballast water but aren't. On the port side, 5 corresponding tanks are empty, filled with nothing but air, becoming more buoyant. The ship is developing a list. To starboard, immediately. Within minutes, the list is 18 degrees. 10 minutes later, 25 degrees. Captain Calamé grabs a handrail as the deck tilts under his feet. He knows. Instantly, he knows. His beautiful ship, his pride, Italy's pride, is dying, and there's nothing he can do to save her. The list is the killer. Within minutes of impact, the Andrea Doria is tilted 18 degrees to starboard. The deck is sloping like a steep hillway. Walking requires grabbing railings, door frames, anything bolted down. 10 minutes later, the list reaches 25 degrees. Passengers who were sleeping tumble from their beds. Furniture slides across cabins and crashes against walls. In the public rooms, chairs and tables pile up on the starboard side. Wine bottles and dinner plates shatter on tilted floors, and water is pouring in. 500 tons of seawater flooding those ruptured fuel tanks. The watertight compartments, those 11 sections separated by steel bulkheads, are designed to contain flooding, but those bulkheads only extend up to A deck. With the ship listing past 20 degrees, water is now high enough to cascade over the tops of those bulkheads into adjacent compartments. The flooding is spreading. An access tunnel between the generator room and the tank pump controls has no watertight door. Water reaches the generator room. Main electrical power fails. The lights go out. Emergency lighting kicks in, dim, inadequate, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. The air conditioning stops. The ventilation stops. Down below, in the darkness, people are screaming. Captain Calamai assesses the situation with the cold clarity of 40 years at sea. He considers trying to counter-flood, pump water into the portside tanks to balance the ship, but the portside tank intakes are now high out of the water. The pumps can't reach, and even if they could, pumping water into the elevated port tanks would actually raise the center of gravity, making the list worse. He considers trying to beach the ship, but the nearest shore is 45 miles away, and the ship is settling fast. They'll never make it. Within 30 minutes of impact, Calamai knows his ship is lost. The question now is how many people he can save. He makes a critical decision. He does not sound the abandoned ship alarm. Here's why. The Andrea Doria has 16 steel lifeboats, 8 on the port side, 8 on the starboard side. But with a 25-degree list, all 8 portside boats are unusable, suspended high in the air above the tilted deck, impossible to swing out and lower without them smashing into the exposed hull. Only the 8 starboard boats can be deployed. 8 boats for 1,706 people. Not enough, not nearly enough. If he sounds the abandoned ship alarm, every passenger will rush to the boat deck. They'll see immediately that half the boats can't be used. They'll panic. People will be crushed in the stampede. Some will jump into the ocean in terror. Children will be separated from parents in the chaos. The casualties could be catastrophic, so Calamai waits. He transmits the SOS. The first call goes out around 11:15 or 11:22 p.m. Sources vary on the exact minute. SOS DIK SOS here at 0320 GMT latitude 40.30 north 69.53 west. Need immediate assistance. Then he elaborates. Danger immediate. Need boats to evacuate 1,000 persons and 500 crew members. We need boats. And later. Impossible to put lifeboats at sea. We need immediate assistance. He's calling for help. Multiple ships. Ships with lifeboats that can supplement his own. If he can keep people calm, Until those ships arrive, he can conduct an orderly evacuation. If he sounds the alarm too soon, people will die unnecessarily. It's a gamble, a captain's decision, the kind that defines a career or ends one. On the Stockholm, Captain Nordenson has rushed to the bridge in his pajamas. His ship's bow is crushed, but she's stable. He orders the crew to empty the freshwater tanks forward, raising the damaged bow higher out of the water. The Stockholm is not sinking. She can help. But when Stockholm's lifeboats reach the Andrea Doria and start bringing survivors back, the Swedish crew is appalled. The first boats arrive carrying mostly Andrea Doria crew members, not passengers. Young, able-bodied men who fled first, leaving passengers, including women, children, and elderly, still aboard the dying ship. Swedish sailors are reportedly so angry they almost turn the boats back. This will become a major controversy. 234 Andrea Doria crew members will be rescued by the Stockholm, crew who left while passengers were still aboard. Some crew performed heroically, many others did not. The investigation will sort through these competing narratives, but the basic truth remains. In the crucial early minutes, when leadership and courage were most needed, too many crew members thought first of their own survival. Back on the Andrea Doria, passengers are emerging from their cabins into nightmare. The dim emergency lighting, the severe angle of the deck, the sound of water rushing somewhere below. Crew members shouting in Italian, other passengers shouting in English, German, Spanish, children crying, someone praying in Latin. Ruth Roman, still in her evening gown, kicks off her high heels and runs down tilted corridors toward cabin 82, where her son Dickie is sleeping. The gown restricts her movement. She tears it, rips the fabric so she can navigate the listing stairs. She reaches her cabin, scoops up Dickie, wraps him in a blanket. She has to get him to the boat deck. But how? The corridors are dark. The ship is listing more severely now. People are pushing past her, climbing up the sloping deck. Mayor Dilworth and his wife Anne are helping other passengers stay calm. Dilworth has seen panic before. He knows how quickly it can turn deadly. He speaks in a steady voice, guiding people toward the starboard side, where the boats are being lowered. Stay together, move slowly, help the person next to you. Down in the lower decks, where the tourist class cabins are located, the situation is far worse. The impact occurred forward and to starboard, but the shock waves and the immediate list have trapped people throughout the ship. Corridors are filling with seawater. Doors are jammed. Language barriers are acute. Many passengers speak only Italian. Many crew speak only limited English. Instructions are misunderstood. People are going the wrong direction, climbing down when they should be climbing up. Linda Morgan regains consciousness on the Stockholm's crushed bow, lying amid wreckage and bodies. She's confused, disoriented. She calls out in Spanish, "Donde está mi madre? Where is my mother?" A Stockholm crewman, Bernabe Polanco Garcia, crawls to reach her. He tells her she's on the Stockholm. She replies in words that will be quoted for decades. "Impossible. I was a passenger on the Andrea Doria. Where am I now?" She has a broken left arm, but is otherwise miraculously intact. She has no memory of how she got here. The physics of the collision somehow lifted her bed with her in it, transported her through the destroyed wall of her cabin, and deposited her on the Stockholm's deck as the ships pulled apart. Her 8-year-old sister Joan, sleeping feet away, was swept into the sea. Her body will never be recovered. Dr. Thor Peterson, thrown through the wall of cabin 56, finds his wife Martha pinned under debris. Her spine is broken. Both legs are broken. He has one morphine syringe. He divides it between Martha and Jane Chianfara, who's been thrown into the same space. Jane's husband, Camille, is dead. She heard him die in the darkness. Dr. Peterson holds Martha, trying to comfort her, trying to figure out how to free her from the wreckage. She dies in his arms before rescuers can reach them. The rescue ships are coming. The Cape Ann, a freighter, is the first to respond. Captain Joseph Boyd turns his ship around immediately. The Cape Ann has only 2 40-person lifeboats, but she's coming anyway. She'll rescue 129 people. The USNS Private William H. Thomas, a U.S. Navy transport carrying troops and dependents, alters course. She'll rescue 159. The Stockholm, despite her own damage, is launching lifeboats. She'll take aboard 545 survivors, though that number includes those 234 crew members who left early. And 44 nautical miles away, on the bridge of the SS Ile de France, Captain Baron Raoul de Beaudéant is making the most consequential decision of the night. The Ile de France is a 44,500-ton French liner, larger than the Andrea Doria, carrying 940 passengers and 826 crew. She's heading for Le Havre. De Beaudéant has received the SOS. Other ships are responding. Does he really need to turn around? Turning around means returning to New York to refuel, delaying his passengers, costing the French line money. He contacts the other rescue ships to assess the severity. Then he understands. Over 1,600 people are aboard a sinking ship. The other vessels don't have enough lifeboats for an evacuation of that scale. scale. If the Andrea Doria goes down before everyone is off, hundreds could die in the water. De Beaudéon gives the order. Turn around. The Ile de France comes about, her massive bulk heeling in the turn, and drives toward the Andrea Doria at maximum speed. 2 a.m., July 26th. The Ile de France arrives at the scene. The fog has lifted, mercifully, mysteriously lifted, just as the massive French liner approaches. De Beaudéon can see the Andrea Doria clearly now. She's listing at least 40 degrees, maybe more. Her starboard side is low in the water. Lights still burning. The ship is dying, but she's not dead yet. De Beaudéon positions his ship 400 yards away, using the Ile de France's bulk as a windbreak to calm the water between the two vessels. Then he gives an order that survivors will remember for the rest of their lives. Light up our name, the funnels, the decks. Light up everything, quickly! The Ile de France blazes with light, every deck illuminated, the ship's name glowing, the red and black funnels spotlit. She looks like a floating Christmas tree, a beacon of hope in the darkness. On the Andrea Doria, passengers see that light and weep with relief. They've been standing on listing decks for hours, watching the ocean get closer, wondering if help would arrive in time. Now they know they're going to live. The Ile de France launches 10 to 13 lifeboats. Sources vary, and those boats begin ferrying people from the Andrea Doria, 4 trips each, back and forth through the night. The French crew works with practiced efficiency. They've drilled for this. They know what to do. But getting people off the Andrea Doria is an ordeal. With the severe list, normal lifeboat procedures are impossible. Passengers have to climb down ropes and Jacob's ladders in the darkness to reach boats at water level. Some are elderly, some are children, some are injured. The ropes are wet and slippery. The ship is groaning, metallic sounds that suggest imminent collapse. People are terrified they'll fall, or the ship will roll over before they reach safety. Around 2 a.m., Ruth Roman watches a young Andrea Doria cadet strap her son Dickie to himself and climb down a rope ladder to a waiting lifeboat. The boat pulls away before she can board. She's screaming for her son. He's not crying, just sitting in the lap of an Italian woman, clutching a red balloon, watching his mother recede into the distance. Ruth will eventually be rescued by the Ile de France. Dickie will be taken to the Stockholm. They won't be reunited until they both reach New York. Mayor Dilworth and his wife Anne are on the last lifeboat picked up by the Ile de France. Before leaving the Andrea Doria, Dilworth wanted to put his socks on. His wife told him, "For God's sake, forget your socks so we can get off this sinking ship." They made it just in time. The evacuation continues through the night, slowly, carefully. The list is getting worse, 40 degrees now, maybe more. Walking on deck requires crawling. The portside lifeboats have broken free of their davits and are floating upside down in a row beside the ship. The starboard side is so low that water is lapping at the lower deck railings. Captain Calamay moves through the ship, checking every cabin, every passageway, making sure no one is left behind. His officers are with him. Staff Captain Maganini, Second Officer Badano. They're exhausted, moving through tilted corridors with flashlights, calling out, listening for responses. Around 5:30 a.m., the last lifeboat departs the Andrea Doria. Calamai intends to go down with his ship. It's the captain's code. The ship is his responsibility. If she dies, he should die with her. But his officers refuse to leave without him. They climb out of a lifeboat and physically force him to join them. He protests. They ignore him. They're not letting him commit suicide over this. A rescue boat takes them to the destroyer escort USS Edward H. Allen. 77 survivors will be rescued by the Allen, including Calamai and his officers. The Andrea Doria is now abandoned, empty except for one man, an American sailor who slept through the entire collision and evacuation and will eventually be found by a salvage crew and rescued by the tanker Robert E. Hopkins, confused about why everyone is gone. 1,660 people have been saved from the Andrea Doria. 46 are dead, most killed instantly at the moment of impact. 4-year-old Norma DiSandro, dropped headfirst into a lifeboat by her panicking father, will die at Brighton Marine Hospital in Boston from a fractured skull. Carl Watriz will suffer a fatal heart attack aboard the Stockholm the following day. But the vast majority are alive, wet, traumatized, some injured, but alive. On the decks of the rescue ships, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot coffee, they watch the Andrea Doria die. The list progresses slowly through the night, then accelerates in the morning. At dawn, the Andrea Doria is listing approximately 50 degrees. She looks grotesque now, the elegant profile transformed into something wounded and unnatural. Her port side is high in the air, exposing her hull. Her starboard side is submerged. The beautiful white superstructure is tilted at an impossible angle. Photographers circle in small planes and boats. This is going to be one of the most documented ship sinkings in history. Every major newspaper and wire service has dispatched reporters and cameramen. The Coast Guard is maintaining a perimeter, but they're allowing press access. The world is watching. At 9:45 a.m., a.m., the sinking accelerates. The list increases from 50 degrees to 70 degrees in minutes. Something has given way inside, a bulkhead has failed, or a major structural element has snapped. The ship is losing her fight. 10 a.m., the starboard side dips below the surface. The 3 swimming pools, those 3 outdoor pools that no ship had ever offered before, are visible, refilling with seawater. The bow is underwater. The stern is rising, exposing the port propeller and shaft. The ship is sliding under. Survivors on the rescue vessels watch in silence. Some are crying. Many of them spent days aboard that ship. They danced in those ballrooms. They swam in those pools. They ate meals in those dining rooms. And now they're watching it die. 10:09 a.m., July 26th, 1956. The SS Andrea Doria capsizes and sinks bow first. The stern rises briefly, one final reach toward the sky, and then she slides beneath the surface. The ocean swallows her. Bubbles and debris rise for a few minutes. Then nothing, just empty water. The ships in the area blow their whistles in salute. It's a maritime tradition. When a vessel dies, you honor her passing. She's gone. 700 feet of Italian pride and artistry and ambition, resting now in 225 feet of water. She's drifted 1.58 nautical miles from the collision point. Final coordinates: 40 degrees 29 minutes 30 seconds north, 69 degrees 51 minutes 0 seconds west, 53 miles southeast of Nantucket. Harry A. Trask, a photographer for the Boston Evening Traveler, captured the final moments from a small airplane, shooting with a 4x5 speed graphic camera at 75 feet altitude. His photograph, taken 9 minutes before the ship vanished, will win the 1957 Pulitzer Prize for photography. The rescue ships carry their survivors to New York. The Ile de France arrives first, steaming into New York Harbor with 753 Andrea Doria survivors crowding her decks. The Stockholm follows, her bow crushed but her engines still running, carrying 545 survivors, plus her own 534 passengers and remaining crew. The Cape Ann, the Private William H. Thomas, the Edward H. Allen, they all converge on New York in a staggered stream. Pier 84, Pier 97. The waterfront is chaos. Families waiting, press photographers, immigration officials, Red Cross workers with blankets and coffee. The survivors descend the gangways looking shell-shocked. Many are still in nightclothes. Some are wrapped in blankets borrowed from the rescue ships. Children clutch toys salvaged from the wreckage. Adults carry nothing. Everything they owned went down with the Andrea Doria. Ruth Roman spots her son Dickie on the Stockholm's upper deck. She calls out. He shouts, "Mommy!" She asks, "Dickie, where's your red balloon?" He shrieks, "It popped!" The moment is captured by photographers and preserved in the Library of Congress. A moment of levity and reunion amid so much loss. Linda Morgan is reunited with her mother Jane, who survived with grievous injuries, broken leg, severe lacerations. Linda's stepfather Camille is dead. Her sister Joan is dead. Her father, ABC News commentator Edward P. Morgan, had professionally reported the collision on his regular broadcast without telling his audience his own daughter was aboard and believed dead. When her survival was confirmed, he made a second broadcast, deeply emotional, barely holding himself together. It becomes a landmark moment in broadcast journalism. The casualty accounting takes days to finalize. 51 dead total, 46 from the Andrea Doria, most killed instantly at impact. 5 Stockholm crew members who were working in the forward compartments, plus the post-evacuation deaths, Norma DiSandro and Carl Watres. Ferdinand, Pete Thierrot, and his wife Frances, bodies never recovered. Their 13-year-old son Peter survived because he was in a separate cabin down the hall. The couple's 4 young sons will be raised by relatives. Camille Cianfara, body never recovered. His wife Jane heard him die. She will never fully recover from her injuries. She'll die on July 25, 1969, exactly 13 years after the collision. Maria Sergio and all 4 of her children, Giuseppe, Anna Maria, Domenica, and little Rocco, all killed. Her husband Ross waited at the dock in South Bend, Indiana. No one came. Jeanette Carlin swept from her cabin into the sea, body briefly recovered on the Stockholm's bow, then lost again as debris shifted. 1,660 survived. Compare this to the Titanic, 2,224 people aboard, 1,500 dead, a 68% death rate. The Andrea Doria, 1,706 people aboard, 51 dead, a 3% death rate. The difference comes down to location, communication, and time. The Titanic sank in the mid-Atlantic in freezing water with no nearby ships. The Andrea Doria sank in busy coastal waters in summer with multiple rescue vessels responding within hours. The Titanic stayed afloat 2 hours and 40 minutes. The Andrea Doria stayed afloat 11 hours. 11 hours, long enough to save everyone who could be saved. The hearings begin in New York on September 19, 1956. Judge Lawrence Walsh who will later become famous as the Iran-Contra Independent Council, presides. Approximately 60 lawyers are involved. This is going to be a fight. The problem is jurisdiction. The collision occurred in international waters. Neither ship was US flagged. No government body has clear authority to investigate. What follows are pre-trial depositions, not an official inquiry, but a legal discovery process, as both shipping companies prepare to sue each other. Third Officer Carstens Johansson testifies first. He endures 14 days of cross-examination. He insists the approach was port to port, and that visibility was clear at his position. Under pressure, he reluctantly admits the Andrea Doria could have been momentarily obscured in a fog bank, but his core story never changes. Based on his radar observations, he believed he was executing a safe port-to-port passing. Captain Calamay testifies afterward. He insists the approach was starboard to starboard. The two accounts are in total contradiction. As analyst John C. Carruthers will later note, obviously, an impossible situation has been created. The facts begin to emerge. The Andrea Doria's faults become clear. Excessive speed in dense fog, 21.8 knots, is barely any reduction from normal cruising speed. Failure to ballast, empty fuel tanks as the builders specified. Calamay's port turn in the final moments, violating the head-on rule, though he believed a starboard-to-starboard pass was already developing. No systematic radar plotting. Officers watched the radar casually, but didn't calculate the other ship's course and speed. No attempt at radio communication. The Stockholm's faults are equally apparent, routing 20 miles north of the recommended eastbound lanes, violating the 1953 North Atlantic Track Agreement. Only one inexperienced officer on the bridge without the captain present. Probable misreading of the radar range scale, making Carstens think the Andrea Doria was 3 times farther away than she actually was, traveling at 18.5 knots without awareness of an approaching fog bank. Failure to sound warning signals. Both ships had radar. Both ships detected each other at 17 miles, roughly 25 minutes before impact. Either captain could have slowed, called the other on the radio, or taken more conservative action. Neither did. A naval engineer named John C. Carruthers will spend years analyzing the collision. He'll publish 2 landmark papers in the U.S. Naval Institute proceedings. His conclusion, the Andrea Doria bore some fault, but the Stockholm bore more. Carstens misread his radar, placed his ship in the wrong traffic lane, and made course changes based on faulty information. Captain Nordenson compounded this by leaving an inexperienced officer alone on the bridge in one of the busiest shipping areas in the world. But here's the problem. Both shipping companies are vulnerable. If either is found negligent in court, they lose their maritime limitation of liability protection, an old legal doctrine that limits a shipowner's liability to the value of the ship after the casualty. Without that protection, both companies face potentially unlimited damages. So on January 22, 1957, in a quiet meeting pressured by their London underwriters, the two companies drop their mutual lawsuits. The Swedish-American line contributes $4 million, the post-collision value of the Stockholm. The Italian line contributes $400,000 initially, with provisions to add up to $1.8 million more. Total fund $4.4 to $6.2 million against $85 million in third-party claims. Each company absorbs its own direct losses. The Swedish-American line loses approximately $2 million in repairs and lost business. The Italian line loses approximately $30 million. The ship was valued at $30 million, insured for roughly $19 million. The final allocation, 87% Italian line, 13% Swedish-American line for miscellaneous expenses. No formal determination of cause is ever published. No criminal charges are filed. No one is held criminally responsible for 51 deaths. Captain Calamay never commands another ship. The Italian line assigns him to shore duty. He resigns in 1957, feeling abandoned and vilified. He retreats to Genoa, living reclusively. He tells a friend, "Before I used to love the sea, now I hate it." In 1972, retired U.S. naval engineer John C. Carruthers writes Calamay a letter. The letter explains that the collision is studied at the U.S. Naval Academy and that Carruthers' analysis shows Calamay bore the least responsibility among all the principals involved. It's a form of exoneration, vindication from an expert. The letter arrives too late. Captain Piero Calamay dies on April 7, 1972, at age 74 in a Genoa hospital. His reported last words are, "The passengers saved." His family says he died of crepacuore, a broken heart. The letter arrives approximately 1 month after his death. Captain Harry Nordenson suffers no career consequences. He's given command of the prestigious new MS Stockholm, the Swedish-American line's new flagship. She makes her maiden voyage on May 14, 1957. Third Officer Carstens Johansson continues his maritime career, serving as an officer on the new Stockholm under Nordenson. The asymmetry of justice is stark. The captain who stayed on the bridge, who evacuated 1,660 people successfully, who saved himself only because his officers forced him. That captain dies in disgrace and heartbreak. The captain who was asleep in his cabin, who left an inexperienced officer alone on the bridge, whose ship violated shipping lane agreements. That captain gets promoted to a better command. History is not always fair. The Andrea Doria collision rewrote maritime law. The disaster became known as the world's first radar-assisted collision. Both ships had radar. Both detected each other at 17 miles, plenty of time to avoid disaster. Yet radar gave the officers false confidence. They maintained high speeds in fog. They made course changes based on casual radar observation without systematic plotting. The technology that was supposed to prevent collisions enabled the collision. Maritime academies around the world added the Andrea Doria to their curriculum as a case study in how not to use radar. The message, technology without proper training and conservative interpretation can be more dangerous than no technology at all. The 1972 Convention on the International Regulations for Preventing Collisions at Sea, COLREGS, incorporated key lessons. Rule 10 formally established traffic separation schemes. The first was implemented in the Dover Strait in 1967, directly addressing the problem of the Stockholm routing into opposing traffic. Rule 6 clarified safe speed requirements in restricted visibility. Rule 7 mandated proper systematic radar plotting rather than casual observation. Rule 19 created specific requirements for vessels not in visual contact in restricted visibility. The disaster drove the SOLAS 1960 Convention, Safety of Life at Sea, adopted June 17, 1960. Requirements for ballasting procedures were strengthened, watertight door integrity, stability calculations in various loading conditions. The Bonner Committee's finding that the Andrea Doria just barely met existing SOLAS specifications prompted demands for more robust standards. The disaster eventually led to the development of probabilistic damage stability methods in the 1970s. The requirement for bridge-to-bridge radio communication was eventually codified in U.S. law through the Vessel Bridge-to-Bridge Radio Telephone Act. If the two ships had simply called each other on the radio and compared notes, "I see you on my radar at bearing X, how do you see me?" the collision would have been avoided instantly. The Andrea Doria was the last major transatlantic passenger vessel to sink before aircraft became the preferred method of oceanic travel. In 1958, just 2 years after the collision, Boeing 707s began non-stop jet service between the US and Europe. By the early 1960s, the great ocean liners were being decommissioned or converted to cruise ships. The age of transatlantic passenger vessels was over. The extensive, contentious publicity around the Andrea Doria disaster accelerated this decline. Why trust your life to a ship that could be sliced open by another ship in the fog when you could fly to Europe in 8 hours? How many lives have been saved by the changes this disaster forced? It's impossible to calculate precisely, but consider every ship that slows in fog, every captain who plots radar contacts systematically, every vessel that stays in its assigned traffic lane. Those actions trace back to lessons learned from the Andrea Doria. The 51 people who died on July 25, 1956, created meaning through their deaths. Not by choice, not willingly, but their deaths made the seas safer for everyone who followed. The wreck of the SS Andrea Doria rests on her starboard side in approximately 240 to 250 feet of water. The top of the wreck originally lay at about 160 feet below the surface. Due to decades of deterioration, it has collapsed and now lies at approximately 190 feet. Peter Gimble, heir to the Gimbel's department store fortune, and Joseph Fox became the first divers on the wreck on July 27, 1956, the day after the sinking. They published photographs in Life magazine. In 1964, a diver named Dan Turner recovered the life-sized bronze statue of Admiral Andrea Doria from the first-class lounge, cutting it free at the ankles with hacksaws. In 1981, Gimbel recovered the first-class bank safe. On August 16, 1984, it was opened on live television, 2 hours broadcast to 161 stations and 44 countries, hosted by George Plimpton. Inside, currency and traveler's checks, but no jewels. In 1993, diver John Moyer recovered 2 massive Guido Gambone ceramic art panels, each weighing approximately 1,000 pounds. The ship's bell was recovered in 2010. The foghorn in 2017. It was sounded at the New Jersey Maritime Museum for the 65th anniversary in 2021. In September 2020, divers Steve Gatto and Tom Packer discovered the Stockholm's severed bull wreckage nearby. At least 22 scuba divers have died exploring the wreck. The hazards are immense: strong currents, water temperatures of 38 to 48 degrees Fahrenheit, low visibility, thick fishing nets and invisible monofilament lines, nitrogen narcosis at depth, and the wreck's accelerating structural collapse. Cinematographer Al Giddings coined the phrase Mount Everest of scuba diving in a 1969 Skin Diver magazine cover story. The wreck is rapidly deteriorating. OceanGate's 2016 submersible survey confirmed significant decay, with many passageways collapsed. Victor Mastone of the Massachusetts Board of Underwater Archaeological Resources has warned it's eventually going to be undivable. Within another generation, the Andrea Doria will be too dangerous and too deteriorated for even the most experienced technical divers to explore. Linda Morgan, the miracle girl, grew up and became chief curator at the McNay Art Museum in San Antonio, Texas. She married Phil Hardberger, who became mayor of San Antonio in 2005. She rarely speaks publicly about the collision. Ruth Roman continued her acting career until her death in 1999. Mike Stoller, of Lieber and Stoller songwriting fame, was rescued by the Cape Ann. When he arrived in New York, his partner Jerry Lieber told him, "We have a smash hit, Hound Dog," sung by some white kid named Elvis Presley. Stoller was too dazed to react. Betsy Drake, Cary Grant's wife, underwent therapy, including hypnosis, to deal with the trauma. Mayor Richardson Dilworth served Philadelphia until 1962. Pierrette Domenica Simpson, 9 years old at the time, wrote Alive on the Andrea Doria in 2006 and became a prominent advocate for the disaster's true history. Why does this disaster still captivate us 70 years later? Partly because of the dramatic rescue. 1,660 people saved in one of history's greatest peacetime sea rescues. Partly because of the mystery at its heart. 2 ships, both with radar, both with experienced crews, colliding in conditions where they should have easily avoided each other. Partly because of Linda Morgan, impossible and real, transported through disaster like something from a fairy tale. But mostly because the Andrea Doria represents something larger. She was a symbol of post-war recovery, of Italy's return to greatness, of technological confidence. And she died because of hidden compromises, empty fuel tanks that should have been ballasted, an unstable design concealed beneath beauty, economic decisions prioritized over safety. The disaster teaches us that cutting corners eventually catches up with you, that technology is only as good as the people using it, that the price of negligence is measured in human lives. The Stockholm remarkably survived for another 69 years after the collision. Repaired in Brooklyn, she returned to service in October 1956. She passed through numerous owners and names: Völkerfreundschaft, Volker, Athena, Azores, Astoria, becoming one of the longest-serving passenger ships in history at roughly 77 years before finally being sold for scrap in 2025. The ship that killed the Andrea Doria outlived her by nearly 7 decades. Divers still go down to the Andrea Doria. Not as many now, the wreck is collapsing, the dangers multiplying with each passing year. But they go. They descend through the cold green water off Nantucket, following their lights down into the darkness, until the shape of her emerges from the gloom, a massive hull on its side, porthole windows like empty eyes, railings draped with fishing nets, the debris field scattered across the ocean floor. They're searching for artifacts, pieces of china with the Italian line logo, brass fittings, fragments of that $1 million art collection. But they're also searching for something else: connection, a tangible link to a moment when everything changed for 1,706 people, when beauty became catastrophe, when confidence became tragedy. 46 people are still down there, in a sense. Their bodies were never recovered. They went down with the ship, trapped in crushed cabins, swept into the sea, lost in the darkness. The Andrea Doria is their grave, but she's also a memorial, a reminder that every ship carries stories, that behind every maritime disaster are individual human beings, their hopes and fears, their last moments, their names: Ferdinand and Francis Thierryot, Camille Cianfara, little Joanne Cianfara, 8 years old, Maria Sergio and her 4 children, Jeanette Carlin, all the others whose names fill the casualty lists. The most beautiful ship in the world sailed into fog on a July evening in 1956 and never sailed out. She died because of decisions made in design offices and executive suites and ship's bridges. She died because someone decided empty fuel tanks didn't need ballast water, because a captain went to bed and left an inexperienced officer alone, because 2 ships steamed at high speed in fog, trusting technology more than prudence. She died, but the lessons lived. Every ship that slows in fog carries her memory. Every officer who plots radar contacts systematically honors her dead. Every traffic separation scheme in every ocean draws its authority from the moment when she capsized and slid beneath the waves. The Andrea Doria rests in darkness now, slowly dissolving into the sea that claimed her. The art is gone, the beauty is gone, only the steel remains, and even that is failing. Soon, there will be nothing left but photographs and memories and the regulations written in response to catastrophe. But for now, she's still there, waiting in the cold and the dark, still teaching her final lesson to anyone willing to descend and listen. Beauty is not safety, confidence is not wisdom, and the sea does not forgive compromise.